The grand hall buzzed with an almost electric energy. Reporters clutched their microphones tightly, camera operators adjusted their lenses, and the crowd murmured in anticipation. It wasn't just another political event. It was one of the year's most talked about gatherings in Washington, D.C., with some of the world's most influential figures in attendance. The focus, however, wasn't on the seasoned politicians or celebrities milling about. All eyes were subtly drawn to a young man standing at the edge of the room, Barron Trump. At just 18, Barron was a striking figure. His height alone made him stand out, but it was his demeanor that truly caught people's attention. He stood quietly, his face calm yet distant, exuding a composed presence that contrasted sharply with the chaos around him. Unlike his father or siblings, Barron rarely made public appearances, and even when he did, he maintained an enigmatic silence that only fueled curiosity about him. Michael Harris, a veteran journalist with decades of experience, stood a few feet away, holding a notebook in one hand and a microphone in the other. Known for his hard-hitting questions and unflinching interviews, Michael had built a reputation for tackling even the most sensitive topics head-on. But today, there was something different about him. His usual confidence seemed to waver as he watched Barron from across the room. He glanced at his assignment notes one more time, which simply read, "Interview Barron Trump." The simplicity of the task belied the complexity of the situation. Barron wasn't a politician, a celebrity, or even a public figure by choice. He was a young man thrust into the spotlight by birth, a reluctant participant in a world that scrutinized his every move. The moment arrived. Michael adjusted his tie, took a deep breath, and approached Barron, who looked up with polite curiosity as the journalist neared. The room seemed to grow quieter, the collective attention shifting toward the two. Other reporters, sensing a potential headline, subtly inched closer with their cameras and recorders ready. Michael hesitated for a fraction of a second, something completely out of character for him. He opened his mouth, but instead of asking a question, he took a step back and lowered the microphone. His next words left everyone stunned. "I can't do this," he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I cannot, in good conscience, interview him." The room froze. Reporters exchanged confused glances, their pens hovering above their notepads. Even Barron's composed expression flickered with surprise. For a brief moment, it felt as though the entire event had paused. "What does he mean?" someone whispered. "Is this a protest?" another speculated. Michael didn't elaborate. Instead, he stepped back further. His gaze locked on Barron's for a moment longer, before he turned and walked away. The cameras followed him, their lenses capturing every step of his retreat. The murmurs in the room swelled into a wave of chatter, but no one had any answers. Barron remained where he was, his expression unreadable. A flicker of curiosity crossed his face, but he said nothing, keeping his silence as he always did. The moment was over as quickly as it had begun, but its impact was immediate. Within minutes, the incident began trending online. Headlines like, "Michael Harris refuses to interview Barron Trump. Why?" and "Journalist walks away from Trump family scion" flooded social media. Speculation ran wild, with theories ranging from political protests to personal vendettas. The mystery of Michael's decision had everyone talking. What could make a journalist known for never backing down refuse to do his job? And why did he direct his statement specifically at Barron Trump? The answers would come later, but for now the world was left with a tantalizing question. What just happened, and why? Hours later, the media storm was in full swing. Social media platforms exploded with debates and theories about Michael Harris's decision. On Twitter, hashtags like #Michael Harris and #Barron Trump interview began trending globally. Everyone had an opinion. Some accused Michael of political bias, claiming his refusal was a thinly veiled statement against the Trump family. Others praised him, suggesting his decision was rooted in protecting Barron from unnecessary scrutiny. The speculation only grew when Michael himself remained silent, refusing to give interviews or respond to the frenzy. News networks replayed the clip of the moment on a loop. Anchors dissected every detail, the expression on Michael's face, Barron's reaction, and the stunned silence that followed. Theories ranged from personal feuds to moral stances, but no one knew for sure. The intrigue reached its peak when Michael finally broke his silence. Late that evening, he uploaded a short video statement to his social media accounts. Sitting at his desk, dressed in his usual professional attire, he looked directly into the camera. His voice was calm but carried a weight that instantly captured attention. "I've spent my entire career asking difficult questions," he began. "I've interviewed presidents, celebrities, and some of the most powerful figures in the world. But today I made a decision that I know has left many of you confused and some of you angry." Michael paused, gathering his thoughts. "I refuse to interview Barron Trump, not out of bias or disdain, but out of respect. He is a young man, barely 18, who has spent his entire life in the shadow of intense public scrutiny. Unlike his family, Barron has never sought the spotlight. He has never asked for attention. And yet the world feels entitled to every piece of him, as if he owes us his life story." The video was raw, unpolished, and deeply personal. Michael leaned forward, his expression resolute. "I looked at Barron today, and I saw someone who has been forced to grow up too fast. Someone who deserves a moment of peace, away from the cameras and the questions. As journalists, we have a responsibility to inform the public, but we also have a responsibility to be human. And today, my humanity outweighed my professionalism." The video ended with a simple statement: "Some stories don't need to be told," and this was one of them. The internet erupted. Within minutes, the video went viral, garnering millions of views and sparking a wave of reactions. Celebrities, journalists, and public figures weighed in. Many applauded Michael for taking a stand, calling his decision a rare act of integrity in a cutthroat industry. Others criticized him, arguing that as a journalist it wasn't his place to make such a call. But the most unexpected response came from Barron himself. The next morning, Barron Trump broke his silence with a short statement on his social media account. It read, "I've grown up being watched, judged, and analyzed by people who don't know me. Yesterday, Michael Harris chose to see me as a person, not a headline. For that, I am grateful. Thank you, Michael." Barron's words were simple, but their impact was profound. The public's perception of him shifted almost overnight. The quiet, reserved young man many had dismissed as irrelevant suddenly became a symbol of resilience. The story didn't end there. Michael's statement sparked a larger conversation about the ethics of journalism and the treatment of public figures' children. Debates raged about where to draw the line between accountability and privacy. News outlets began reassessing their policies, and organizations advocating for mental health and privacy saw a surge in support. For both Michael Harris and Barron Trump, that single moment of refusal had changed everything. What began as a silent protest had become a powerful reminder that sometimes the most impactful stories are the ones we choose not to tell. As the dust began to settle, the story of Michael Harris and Barron Trump took on a life of its own. Media outlets across the globe continued to discuss the implications of Michael's decision, dissecting every angle. The incident had evolved from a simple act of refusal to a movement, a rallying cry for more humane journalism and the protection of young public figures. Michael, now an unwitting symbol of journalistic integrity, was invited to countless talk shows and interviews, but he turned down most of them. He didn't want to capitalize on the moment. Instead, he chose to amplify the voices of those advocating for change, particularly organizations that work to protect children in the media. Meanwhile, Barron Trump, who had spent most of his life avoiding the spotlight, found himself at the center of a global conversation. Yet in typical fashion, he remained mostly silent. However, his brief statement from the day before continued to circulate, resonating deeply with people from all walks of life. Behind the scenes, something unexpected began to happen. Inspired by Michael's actions and Barron's dignified response, other journalists started reconsidering their own approaches. Prominent news networks announced revisions to their policies, pledging to treat minors and young adults connected to public figures with greater care and respect. The impact extended beyond journalism. Social media platforms saw a rise in discussions about mental health, privacy, and the ethical responsibilities of both the press and the public. Barron, who had once been a figure of mystery, became a symbol of resilience for young people navigating their own struggles with judgment and expectation. But the biggest twist came a few weeks later when Michael Harris and Barron Trump crossed paths again. this time at a public event organized to promote ethical journalism. Barron uncharacteristically agreed to participate in a panel discussion. When asked why he decided to attend, his answer was simple: because Michael Harris reminded me that not everyone sees me as a story. Some see me as a person, and that's the kind of world I want to help create. The event was a turning point, not just for the movement, but for Barron himself. For the first time, he began to embrace his platform, using it to advocate for causes close to his heart, including mental health and the importance of privacy in a digital age. As for Michael, his career shifted in a direction he never anticipated. He became a vocal advocate for ethical storytelling, leading workshops and seminars for young journalists. His refusal to interview Barron Trump had started as a small act of personal conviction, but had grown into a catalyst for systemic change. The story of that day when a journalist said no and a young man found his voice became more than just a viral moment. It became a testament to the power of integrity, respect, and the courage to see beyond the headlines. And in the end, it wasn't just Michael Harris or Barron Trump who were changed. It was everyone who watched, listened, and learned from their story. That single decision, Michael's refusal to interview Barron, continued to ripple through society in unexpected ways. Months later, the movement sparked by the incident began to show real, measurable change. Major media outlets introduced stricter guidelines about covering the lives of minors connected to public figures. Social media platforms added new tools to report and reduce harassment targeted at public figures' children. Barron Trump, once seen as a quiet figure in the background of his family's political drama, emerged as an unlikely advocate for youth privacy and mental health. He began speaking at carefully selected events and even partnered with organizations focused on protecting young individuals from online abuse. His speeches were short but impactful, always carrying the same message: we all deserve a moment to be human, away from the noise. For Michael Harris, life took an entirely different turn. The veteran journalist found himself at the center of a new kind of conversation, one that focused on ethics and humanity in storytelling. Invitations poured in for him to lead seminars, write books, and join panels about the future of journalism. Despite the accolades, Michael remained grounded, often repeating a simple mantra: the story isn't about me, it's about knowing when not to tell a story. In an interview months after the incident, Michael reflected on that pivotal day. When I looked into Barron's eyes, I didn't see a headline. I saw a young man who's had more eyes on him than anyone deserves. I realized that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do as journalists is to step back. The world doesn't always need another story. Sometimes it needs silence. The public response to Michael's sentiment was overwhelming. His words resonated deeply with parents, educators, and even younger audiences, who often felt the pressures of living in an age of constant exposure. 1 year later, the incident was still being talked about, not as a scandal or controversy, but as a turning point. Schools began incorporating lessons on media literacy and digital ethics, teaching students about the importance of respecting boundaries in a hyper-connected world. Barron and Michael eventually collaborated on a joint project, a documentary titled Behind the Spotlight: The Cost of Public Life. The film explored the unseen struggles of children born into fame and highlighted stories of those who, like Barron, had to navigate extraordinary circumstances. The documentary was a massive success, earning critical acclaim and sparking even more conversations about the ethics of modern journalism. In the end, what began as a quiet act of refusal turned into a movement that reshaped how the media and society viewed young public figures. Michael Harris's decision to step away from the microphone didn't just change his life, it changed the narrative for countless others. And for Barron Trump, that moment of unexpected respect became the foundation for a new chapter in his life, one where he could finally step out of the shadows, not as a headline, but as himself.